As my eyes opened, I found myself in a dark room, the air thick with the scent of damp concrete and something metallic, like old blood. My heart pounded as I tried to make sense of my surroundings, my hands instinctively reaching out to feel the cold, hard ground beneath me. Panic surged through me as I remembered the last moments before everything went black. Ian's cold grin, Lucy's wild eyes. They had cornered me, trapped me like a prey with no escape. I could hear faint murmurs from the other side of the wall, and fear gripped my chest as I realized that whatever came next could break me. Story time. The day I entered the wrong room at the pub was the day my life took a turn I never could have anticipated. I had come to the pub to unwind, a little escape from my mundane routine, never imagining that a single misstep would lead me into the world of Dante Moretti, the city's most enigmatic and dangerous mafia don. It all started innocently enough. I was meeting my friend Karen at our usual spot, a cozy, somewhat run-down pub at the edge of town. The place had its charm, with its flickering neon sign and the warm hum of conversation mingling with the clinking of glasses. But that night, I was distracted, lost in my phone, trying to send a text when I mistook a door for the ladies' room. Instead of the familiar scent of old wood and beer, I walked into a room shrouded in smoke and an unsettling silence. The air was dense, the kind that feels like it's pressing in on you. I looked around, realizing I had stumbled into a private area, and my heart raced as I caught sight of the men seated around a large table, their faces a mixture of surprise and curiosity. At the head of the table sat Dante Moretti. Even though his back was initially to me, I could feel his presence, a magnetic, almost palpable force that made my pulse quicken. When he turned around, his dark eyes locked onto mine, and a predatory smile curled his lips. "What do we have here?" he asked, his voice smooth and chilling. I should have turned on my heel and fled. Instead, I found myself frozen in place. My breath came in shallow bursts as I tried to muster a coherent response. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I think I took a wrong turn." Dante's eyes narrowed, and the room fell even quieter. "I see," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Well, since you're here, why don't you stay a while?" His gaze was intense, and despite the dangerous aura that surrounded him, I felt an inexplicable pull toward him. I hesitated but ended up taking a seat at the edge of the table, unable to tear my eyes away from him. The conversation that followed was a blur, a mix of sharp questions and cryptic answers. I learned that Dante was a man of immense power and influence, though he spoke of his life in riddles. The more I stayed, the more I found myself intrigued by him, despite the danger that seemed to hang in the air. Dante watched me with a keen interest, and it wasn't long before he made his intentions clear. "You're not leaving," he said softly, a smirk playing on his lips. "You belong to me now." I should have been scared, but instead, I found myself captivated by him. I spent the next few weeks getting to know him and his world, a world far beyond anything I had ever imagined. Dante was possessive, demanding, and yet, he showered me with affection and lavish gifts that left me breathless. One morning, I awoke in a luxurious suite overlooking the azure waters of the Mediterranean. The previous evening had been a whirlwind of glamour and opulence, a private dinner aboard a yacht that sparkled under the stars. Diamonds and pearls adorned my neck, and designer clothes filled the closet. It was as if Dante wanted to overwhelm me with a life of splendor and excess. "Good morning, Liv," Dante greeted me with a smile as he entered the room, carrying a tray of breakfast. His touch was tender as he placed it beside me. "I trust you're enjoying your stay?" "I am," I said, my voice filled with awe. "It's incredible." He chuckled, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "I want you to have the best of everything," he said. "And as long as you're mine, you will." The trips and gifts continued, each more extravagant than the last. Private villas in Paris, shopping sprees in Milan, and quiet retreats in the Swiss Alps. Dante's world was one of unrestrained luxury, and he spared no expense in showing me how much I meant to him. Despite the opulence, there was a part of me that remained unsettled. Dante's possessiveness was all-consuming. He was meticulous about my safety, my whereabouts, and even my choices. But there was a strange comfort in his control, a sense of security that I had never known before. I found myself falling deeper into his world, caught between the allure of his lavish lifestyle and the confines of his control. It was a strange paradox, an existence filled with beauty and luxury, but tethered by his unyielding dominance. I realized that Dante's world had become my own, a world where I was both his prized possession and his willing accomplice. And even though the boundaries of our relationship were defined by his possessiveness, I couldn't help but embrace the life he offered, the life I had stumbled into with that single, fateful wrong turn. But my trouble in paradise began from the moment Dante first introduced me to Ian. I sensed something was wrong. The party was in full swing, crystal glasses clinked, laughter filled the room, and a soft melody played from the grand piano in the corner. Dante kept me close by his side, his arm draped around my waist like a shield. He always had a possessive streak, but tonight it was different. His grip was tighter, his gaze more intense, as if he wanted to prove something to everyone in the room. And then, he brought me to Ian. "Ian, this is Liv," Dante announced, his voice carrying a tone of pride mixed with warning. "My mistress." Ian turned, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes were anything but. He took my hand, his grip firm but not quite friendly. "A pleasure, Liv," he said with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Dante's told me so much about you." Dante's arm tightened around me, his fingers digging into my side. "She's mine, Ian," he said lightly, but I could hear the edge in his voice. "So, behave." Ian chuckled, but his gaze never left mine. "Of course," he replied, but there was a flicker in his eyes, something dark and unsettling. That flicker didn't go away. It stayed with him, lurking in the background of every encounter we had after that. Ian found excuses to visit more often, always appearing unannounced, lingering a bit too close, his comments more suggestive, his eyes lingering longer. I felt Dante's tension grow whenever Ian was around, and he became even more possessive, holding me closer, almost as if he sensed something I couldn't. One night, after a dinner party, Dante was called away to handle some urgent business. I stayed behind, lingering in the glow of the night, the city lights casting long shadows across the walls. I had barely finished my glass of wine when I heard the soft creak of a door opening behind me. I turned, and there was Ian, standing in the doorway. His smile was too familiar, too confident. "Dante left in such a hurry," he said, stepping closer. "I thought I'd keep you company." I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. "I'm fine, Ian," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't need to stay." He ignored my words, coming closer still. "You know," he began, his voice low, "Dante doesn't deserve you. He doesn't know how to really take care of you." I took a step back, my heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" Ian's smile grew colder. "I think you know, Liv," he whispered, reaching out to touch my arm. I jerked away, but he grabbed my wrist, pulling me close, his breath hot against my cheek. "Come on," he murmured. "Don't act like you haven't thought about it." I felt a surge of panic and tried to twist out of his grasp, but his hold tightened. "Let go of me, Ian," I hissed, struggling against him. He just laughed, a low, menacing sound. "Why fight it, Liv? You don't have to pretend with me. I know what you really want." Before I could respond, the door opened again, and there stood Lucy, Ian's sister. Her smile was sharp, her eyes narrowed with something I couldn't quite place. Was it jealousy? Anger? Triumph? "Everything all right here?" she asked, but her tone was far from innocent. She stepped closer, her gaze shifting from me to Ian, then back again. "Ian, don't be too forward. We wouldn't want to scare her, yet." I felt a cold dread settle in the pit of my stomach. I pulled away from Ian, managing to free myself from his grip. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Ian grinned. "You see, Liv, Dante's obsession with you, it's becoming a problem." Lucy's smile widened, a cruel glint in her eyes. "He doesn't need distractions," she said. "Especially not ones like you." I tried to move, to run, but Ian blocked my path. "You're not going anywhere," he whispered, his voice cold and commanding. My heart raced, fear gripping me. You can't do this, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Ian leaned closer, his smile twisted. Oh, but we already are. Lucy moved quickly, pulling something from her bag, a syringe. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I tried to scream, but Ian's hand clamped over my mouth, muffling the sound. Just relax, he murmured. It'll be over soon. I struggled, but Ian was too strong. I felt the sharp sting of the needle in my arm, and everything began to blur. The last thing I saw was Lucy's satisfied smile as the darkness closed in. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer Dante's mistress. I was their pawn, and my paradise had turned into a living nightmare. As my eyes opened, I found myself in a dark room, the air thick with the scent of damp concrete and something metallic, like old blood. My heart pounded as I tried to make sense of my surroundings, my hands instinctively reaching out to feel the cold, hard ground beneath me. Panic surged through me as I remembered the last moments before everything went black. Ian's cold grin, Lucy's wild eyes. They had cornered me, trapped me like a prey with no escape. I could hear faint murmurs from the other side of the wall, and fear gripped my chest as I realized that whatever came next could break me. My vision was blurry, and I struggled to make sense of my surroundings. The room was small and suffocating, with no windows, just concrete walls trapping me in the darkness. I was alone, but I never knew Lucy and Ian hated me this much. They had always been envious of me, the woman Dante adored. It wasn't just jealousy, it was something much darker. They couldn't stand that Dante, the powerful Mafia Don, had chosen me, Liv, someone they deemed beneath him. I don't know how long I had been here. Hours? Days? It all blurred together in a haze of hunger, fear, and exhaustion. I thought about Dante, wondering if he even knew I was gone. My heart ached at the thought of him. Would he search for me? Would he care enough to look? I had been his mistress, sure, but to Dante, that meant I was his. No one touched what belonged to him without consequences. And then, I remembered his words, strong, commanding, as he'd once whispered them in my ear. No one takes what's mine. No one touches you but me. He was possessive in a way that made my heart race, but in moments like this, I found comfort in that darkness. If anyone could save me, it was him. I don't know when, but at some point, I heard voices. Footsteps. Ian's men, no doubt, checking in. I held my breath, fear tightening my chest as they passed the door without opening it. I thought about trying to escape, but how? There was nothing in the room but me, and every corner felt like a dead end. Suddenly, everything changed. There was a noise outside, different this time. Loud, urgent, and chaotic. And then, the door slammed open. My heart leapt as I saw him. Dante. He stood there, tall, dark, furious. His eyes, those dangerous, cold eyes that I had seen strike fear into so many, softened only when they landed on me. He crossed the room in 2 strides and, without a word, swept me into his arms. I clung to him, feeling his strength, his warmth. I was safe now. Dante had come for me, just like I'd hoped. I'm here, Liv, he murmured, his lips brushing my hair as he held me close. No one will ever touch you again. I barely had time to respond before the gunshots rang out. Lucy and Ian. Dante had taken care of them without a second thought. I didn't look, didn't want to see the aftermath. All I knew was that Dante was with me now, and that was all that mattered. He carried me out of the darkness, into the fresh air, and into the waiting car. His hand never left mine, and as we drove back to his estate, his voice was soft, protective. I'm sorry, Liv, he said, his jaw clenched. I let them get too close. That won't happen again. No harm will ever come to you. His words, as possessive and fierce as they were, felt like a promise. I believed him. In Dante's world, loyalty was everything, and I knew now, more than ever, that I was his. We reached his mansion just before dawn, and he carried me inside, refusing to let anyone else near me. He took me to my room, but for the first time, he stayed. He sat beside me, holding my hand until sleep finally took me, his presence a shield against the nightmares I'd endured. When I woke again, the sunlight streamed through the windows. Dante was still there, watching over me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't expected, genuine affection. In his own twisted, dangerous way, Dante loved me. And as long as I was with him, I knew no one would ever dare hurt me again. The nightmare was over, and in Dante's arms, I found peace.